Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second in a series of webinars hosted by Nephos Technologies. Today, we're going to be looking at how we help with the migration of workloads into the cloud, into an infrastructure as a service platform, along with our partner, Velostrata. We're going to run through a brief overview and introduction into Nephos Technologies, who we are and how we're working with our customers to help them along their cloud journey, before diving into some of the challenges that we see around migration and what you should be looking for from a cloud migration perspective before I hand over to Tom, who's going to walk through the Velostrata platform, demonstrate that for you and give you an understanding as to how they can smooth that transition from on-premise to in-cloud. So to start with, Nephos Technologies are a cloud systems integrator. We design, deliver cloud and next generation data center infrastructure. Ultimately, we do that with three tenets in mind and three core principles. As a business, we are cloud first. We started life in the height of the cloud boom, if you like, and we focus there. We focus on software-defined next-generation architectures, and we do that independently of any one cloud provider. We have no investment in our own data center, in our own managed service offerings. What we do is effectively enable our customers to use public, private, and hybrid cloud infrastructure from leading vendors. And we're proven at doing so. So as an organization, we have been lucky enough to be awarded a Gartner Core Vendor award within our first year of existence, and we hold a very high customer retention rate, over 95%. And that scans across some of the world's largest organizations, across multiple vertical markets. Right the way from financial services through to the world's largest media organizations and engineering organizations. Now, what I'm going to drive into slightly is where we see that cloud market, generally speaking, to set some context. We're going to look at the predictions, what the future may hold, and where we are now, and some of the challenges that are kind of hindering organizations from adopting cloud infrastructure, generally speaking. Now, these statistics come from an IDC report launched at the end of 2016, and they focused on predictions for 2017 for cloud adoption. We've pulled out some of the most poignant stats here, the first being around multi-cloud. And we see this today. This is transitioning through and coming to fruition already. Most organizations are, if not delivering today, planning for a multi-cloud strategy. They're looking to leverage multiple providers, be that AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google, whether that's their on-premise private cloud infrastructure. Ultimately, each of them has their own benefits, pitfalls, etc. And what's clear is that multi-cloud is the approach that is likely to take off. The second stat is all around cloud management. So what we're looking at really here, when you consider cloud management and also self-service automation, I think to date what most organizations have done is that they've taken tactical advantage of the cloud. I think now organizations are looking to be more strategic about how they do that, to apply more governance, more control, but also make it a truly frictionless service. That really comes through cloud management and automation. So when we consider that, actually, it's really important that those workloads are clean and easy to migrate from your on-premise infrastructure to a cloud infrastructure, back again, from cloud to cloud. You know, that idea of app mobility and portability is key.
Yeah,
And this is,
sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say,
sorry.
sorry to jump in. Yeah, we're totally seeing this too, Lee. These are great points. I mean, we're seeing a lot of popularity gaining for things like multi-cloud and even hybrid cloud, and automation is becoming a really key part of success too. So these are really good, really important points.
Thanks. Now, the challenge when we dive into this around multi-cloud and cloud in general, there's some key driving forces. First off, you look at commercials, you look at features and SLAs. They're kind of the simple things to consider, right? When we look at that multi-cloud approach, what's driving people to consume from multiple different providers. But two of the probably most poignant and most challenging forces that are driving people towards this multi-cloud approach are one that organizations want to avoid lock-in. No one wants to be stuck in a single infrastructure. No one wants to be stuck in a provider permanently. They want the flexibility and the option, at least, to be able to move that data between providers and back on-prem should they so choose. And some of that is driven by geography. You look at areas of Europe, Germany, for example, Luxembourg, these sorts of areas where actually it's key from a data governance perspective that data is stored in the right locations and accessible only in the right locations. And that geographical reach of the providers is one of the things that is definitely driving that multi-cloud approach. Sorry, Tom?
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask: is GDPR playing an even bigger role now in terms of where customers are choosing to locate their clouds, or to to put some workloads in different clouds to kind of like be more compliant or make compliance easier?
I think it's beginning to. I think there's a realization across businesses that we certainly talk to that GDPR is coming quickly. And there needs to be that level of governance and control. So yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly playing a part. I know certainly when we speak to organisations that have a kind of a disparate workforce and disparate data, that actually that ability to pick and choose where you're deploying services is going to be a big factor for them, for sure. So I mean, the challenges that come with that, though, if you look at each of the vendors has their own ecosystem, they all have their own native tool sets, there are a lot of differences over the APIs that they use, and ultimately what that drives to is compromise, or has done certainly today. You look at that lowest common denominator factor, it's kind of how far can we strip the application back to deliver it in cloud without impacting our agility. Now, in turn, what that means is you tend to sacrifice a lot of the additional feature set that you get from those cloud providers. So being able to abstract all of that, being able to give that sort of, I guess, overarching brokerage level to give that flexibility is one of the biggest drivers here for us, we see, and one of the biggest restrictions as well that's sort of holding people back. One of the other things that we don't mention in there actually is all around the cost of migration. I think when you consider a traditional deployment model, the days of the big five, so to speak, charging extortionate day rates to migrate applications into the cloud or to another platform, it can quite easily annihilate the TCO or the cost benefit that you're looking to gain from adopting a cloud infrastructure platform. So again, that speed, low cost, agile delivery and migration of those workloads is a key factor. We look at that maturity model, and I think today, where we've currently seen it, most organizations are in those first two blocks. They've taken the opportunity for new line of business applications, for tactical deployments, if you like, in many cases, for using the cloud as a delivery mechanism. And that's where most people have started off. You take the SaaS workloads out of that, where people are adopting Office 365, SharePoint Online, these sorts of applications that are kind of making that easier for them. But from an infrastructure perspective, we've certainly seen that to date it's been a lot more ad hoc and opportunistic. What we do, however, see is the change in conversation and the change in the fact that actually people, I think, are more comfortable now with public cloud infrastructure. So we're now at a point where actually we want to make that repeatable. We want to apply governance. We want to be able to put the right tooling in to make cloud a strategic option for us. We want to be able to manage that infrastructure, and we want to make sure it's optimized. But when we optimize it, we also need to be able to keep that portability of those application sets. And that's a big aspect for a lot of customers today. Now, I'm sure everyone's heard this line of we have a cloud-first strategy. I'm going to touch on that slightly. We believe when organizations are embarking on this whole cloud journey, that there's three key pillars to it. Yes, you need a strategy. You need to understand the real cost of delivering those applications in the cloud. You need to be able to understand what the governance control is and all of those good things. So that's the first pillar. The second piece is all around migration. How do we make that migration process simple, consistent, with the right level of flexibility to be able to, test that workloads work in the cloud before we go full tilt into a deployment? How do we make sure that actually we can migrate that data back, should we so choose? And the last piece is the management aspect. Once we've developed our strategy, we've got our tooling in place, and we've got the capability to migrate, and we've done that, how do we manage it on an ongoing basis? Now, our focus today is on that migration pillar, which is where the team at Velostrata come into. For us, we believe there's four key components to that migration. Therefore, integration is the first. Ultimately, you rely on your virtualizers today, the hypervisor aspect, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, whatever it may be. I'm sure, no doubt, most people here are considering containerization moving forward as well. But that sort of tight integration into virtualizers like VMware is key to giving us that portability, and that portability is what gives us the ability to avoid lock-in, to enable us to move applications to the providers that we want to move them to when we want to move them at the click of a button. That migration should be cloud agnostic, we believe. We don't believe that you should be tied in and locked into a single platform or a proprietary system that means that, once we've migrated that service into Amazon, for argument's sake, well, how do we get it back? How do we convert that back out into something we can use in Azure? So we need to do it in a transparent way, and we need to do it efficiently. We need to do it in a way that means that the cost of that migration, the effort of that change, doesn't negate the benefit that we're bringing. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Tom. Tom's going to walk you through the Velostrata platform and how we're using that to kind of overcome a lot of that complexity and those challenges.
Great. Thanks, Lee. Great intro for the upcoming slides. So my name is Tom Nickel. I'm with Velostrata. If you're not familiar with Velostrata, we are a cloud migration and mobility platform. So our goal is really to get customers on-premises workloads into the public cloud as quickly and as simply as possible. So when you're, defining your cloud-first strategy, cloud migrations do pose a number of really kind of important and sometimes tricky questions. Questions around complexity. How are you going to handle things like multi-tier apps like SAP, large databases, lots of data? Should you do things like application rewriting? There's a lot of nuance to consider potentially when moving to the cloud. Questions around labor. Is your organization going to need do you have the specific expertise in-house needed? In a lot of cases, it's actually crucial to partner with someone who has those expertise. And what's going to happen if the migration platform you pick requires things like installing replication agents or doing extensive kind of deployments and configuration? How does that play into your cloud migration project? Questions around scale. There's obviously lots of workloads. There's plenty of line of business users who rely on these workloads. So how do you get them into the cloud with minimum downtime and things like that? How do you optimize the process? How do you automate the process? How do you make this move as smooth and predictably as you can? And then lastly, risk. Obviously, we're all afraid of lengthy downtimes or lengthy data transfers, things going wrong during a long data transfer to the cloud. How do you perform testing? How do you validate? How do you create sandboxes to test? How do you roll back if something doesn't go quite right? So these are a lot of the questions that you might be faced with your own cloud migrations. And so on the one hand, partners are a great way to answer a lot of these questions and help carve out your strategy. And Velostrata is a great way to realize some of those strategies with a very fast, simple cloud migration solution. And one of the most important things you can do is when you're evaluating cloud migration solutions, the actual software, make sure they do all of these things. Make sure they can handle multi-tier apps. Make sure that they can handle testing and rollback. Make sure they transfer quickly. Make sure they handle automation, things like that. So, have a checklist of the things that are important to you, and make sure your cloud migration solution platform meets those needs. Because believe it or not, there's actually plenty of quote-unquote migration solutions out there on the market that were actually designed for disaster recovery, and they've been kind of rebranded. These replication tools have been kind of rebranded for cloud migration. And can they get the job done? Maybe, probably, but it's probably not going to be smooth. In a lot of cases, they actually introduce some of these complexities and challenges as a result of having been architected for a completely different use case. So, okay, so moving on. So that opens a good question. How fast and easy is it to use Velostrata to migrate applications to the cloud? And we thought the most effective way to showcase this would be with a demo. So let's find out. I'm going to swap over to my demo environment really quick. I'm going to kick off a migration with Velostrata from VMware on-premises into the Microsoft Azure cloud. Then we're going to let it kind of do its thing in the background for, 5 or 10 minutes, and then we will come back and I will show you just how quickly we get applications running in the cloud. So let's go over to our demo environment now. Okay, switching gears, we are now in our Velostrata demo environment. As you can see here, we've got a VM running on premises. It's called Sugar CRM. It's basically a lightweight CRM, a lot like Salesforce. Let's go ahead and click that and just kind of show you quickly what it looks like. Show you what it looks like running on-prem. Here we go. So running nice and smooth. Going to go back to vCenter. And what's nice about Velostrata, what makes it even easier to use, is that Velostrata operations are built directly into a plugin that's built into vCenter. So all I have to do is right-click our Sugar CRM VM, navigate down to Velostrata operations, and then you can see here we can either run it in the cloud, we can completely migrate it over to the cloud, we can do an offline migration, which is a more specific kind of nuanced migration, or we can boot up a test clone if we just want to quickly validate how this is going to perform in the cloud. We can do that without incurring any like downtime or data changes to the production system. So we're going to kick off a migration here. So I'll go ahead and click Migrate. That's going to pop open our wizard here. On this first menu, we pick the cloud extension we want to migrate to. We're going to use Azure for this demo. Click Next. Now we'll select some options for this particular cloud instance. The most notable thing here is probably the licensing and also the instance type. So we're going to pick a slightly bigger VM here. Let's do standard. 4 vCPUs and 7 gigs of RAM should be plenty for Sugar CRM. Go ahead and click Next. Here we can pick our storage policy. So write back and write isolation. For write back, it means that we will keep any data changes that occur when this application starts running in the cloud, we'll synchronize back with on-prem. If this is more of like a testing run, or you don't want to keep the data consistent, then you would pick write isolation, and that means that any changes you make in the cloud once the app starts running in the cloud would not get synchronized back on-prem. So we'll do write back. I'm going to keep things consistent. That also empowers things like stateful rollback and things like that. Click next. Here we just click the security group. We'll leave that as is. Networking, we'll leave that as is as well. Obviously, you could configure this for your own usage. Migration storage account, so we'll leave that as is as well. And then our final next, you can review what we've picked here, and then go ahead and click finish. And once you click finish, the migration is basically going to kick off. Once it does that, you can view the progress from a couple of places. So you can see here it's kicking off officially. Right here, we'll have a Velostrata portlet that begins right here, cloud instance information. So VM state in transition. What that basically means is that it's kicking off the migration. It's going to shut this VM down on premises and then begin booting it in the cloud within just a few minutes. And then once the application is running live in the cloud, that's when the remaining data migration will take place in the background. So it's actually a very seamless way to get to the cloud. It definitely minimizes downtime because the app runs quickly. And since everything is syncing back with the data on-prem, the data remains completely consistent as well. So especially when you compare this to, like replication-based migration solutions, it's definitely a much more seamless way to do the migration, to avoid downtime, to get the application running. And it also basically eliminates complicated cutover processes that other solutions lead to. When you finally have migrated the data with them, you have to do kind of like a complex cutover process to keep things consistent. Whereas with Velostrata, we're doing that all automatically for you, throughout the entire migration. So beginning it and ending it with cutover are both very easily very seamless, minimal downtime. You can also monitor how things are going via the task menu. So if we click over here to monitor and then tasks, you can see here the Velostrata Manager running cloud operation has begun. We're already at 15%. And what running cloud basically means, running cloud is the first part of our migration, right? We want to start that application in the cloud as fast as humanly possible. Usually only takes about 5 minutes. And then once that application is running smoothly in the cloud, like I said, all the data continues to migrate in the background. So it's a very seamless way to get apps into the cloud with basically minimal downtime. It makes it really easy to schedule the maintenance windows that you do this in, makes those windows much smaller. So all in all, we've really aimed to build a solution that's really quite simple. So we're going to let this hang on in the background for 5 or 6 minutes, let it do its thing. In the meantime, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of our architecture and some of our customer success stories. So I'm going to go back to the slides now. Give me 1 sec. Perfect. Okay, great. So while our demo is running, we're going to let that do its thing in the background. It should take between 5 to 10 minutes to get that application running in the cloud. But for the sake of time on this webinar, we'll talk a little bit more about the Velostrata architecture. So now that you've seen how you manage it, it would probably help to understand the architecture a little bit better. So this is definitely, so I'm in marketing, so this is kind of a more of a marketecture. So don't let our CTO know that I'm using this slide. Obviously, we could do a much deeper dive on technology. This is kind of the quick overview. So on the left here, you have your on-premises deployments. You've got your storage, your data center, your VMs, your physical servers, and what we call the Velostrata on-prem appliance. It's basically just a VM that you deploy into your VMware architecture. Then on the right, we have the cloud. So we've got the Velostrata cloud appliance that sits in the cloud side, and we've got both the native cloud storage through the cloud vendor, and we've also got what we call a Velostrata cache. And the Velostrata cache is a really important part of getting the applications running in the cloud quickly. So the first thing to note about Velostrata that we hope you'll see, and what you just saw in the demo, is that we're very simple. And a big part of that is that we're agentless. A lot of cloud migration solutions on the market do require you to install agents, either on the source or the destination. They're replication agents. They're used to copy the data verbatim from on-prem into the cloud, and it often takes quite a long time. And then once the data transfer is completed, it can often lead to a pretty complex cutover because you have to make sure that downtime is minimized, but data is synchronized and stuff like that. We write a lot about things like this on our blog if you want to read a little bit more about these particulars. So we aim to be very simple through our agentless technology. And when you kick off a migration or a running cloud operation or even a test clone, we aim to be extremely fast. And the way that we get applications running in the cloud so fast is through a technology that we've called streaming. What we basically do is on premises, we decouple the storage from the compute. We calculate exactly what data is needed to boot that workload in the cloud quickly. We transfer that data quickly into our Velostrata cloud cache, and then we're able to start that application within like 5 or 10 minutes, while 99% of the rest of that application's data remains on-prem. And we will continue to transfer the rest of that data to the cloud in the background while the application continues to run. And any changes that are made in the cloud or on-prem in the meantime will be completely synchronized. So that accomplishes a number of really crucial things. It minimizes your downtime because the app runs in 5 or 10 minutes. B, it keeps all of your data completely synchronized, so you don't have to worry about data loss or inconsistencies or anything like that. C, it means there really is no cutover. Since the data is transferring seamlessly in the background, there's nothing to cut over at the end. You can perform a very simple detach operation and go cloud native, but there's no complicated application quiesce process or anything like that. So it's a very elegant solution to getting apps in the cloud quickly and managing what could be a very long data transfer component without actually disrupting anything. In addition to that, we're extremely scalable. We do have mass migration automation through our runbook automation tool, where you can very easily schedule and automate multi-tier applications that have 10 or 20 or 30, whatever, however many number of VMs that you need to move in a specific order. And we're extremely safe because we have stateful on-prem rollback. So let's say you've done your migrate operation, all the data is already finished migrating to the cloud. If you haven't detached completely yet, then at any point you could actually roll back that application on-prem very easily. All the data, once again, remains consistent. The application will begin running back on-prem within another 5 or 10 minutes. So it's a very fast and easy and safe way to move things to and from a cloud or multiple clouds because the operations are so seamless. So that's just kind of a quick overview of our architecture. Like I said, there's a lot more detail and nuance on our website and our blog. This is just to give you kind of a quick feel for how we do what we do. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the architecture, let's talk a little bit about how we're helping customers. So these are just 3 kind of quick customer success stories to kind of illustrate some of the use cases that customers are relying on both partners and a software solution like Velostrata to help them succeed at their cloud migration. So the first was we actually had a migration project that came to us. They were 6 months behind schedule. They were trying to use replication agents, and it just wasn't working. So they did a quick pilot with us. They loved what they saw. They immediately recognized the value. They deployed us, and within a couple weeks, they had actually completely closed that gap. So they took a 6 month, being behind 6 months, and brought that up to where the project should have been in about 2 or 3 weeks, which was pretty impressive, especially because they were using production applications that were processing financial transactions. So these were, mission critical applications. These were not like sandboxes or dev tests or anything. Those are important too, but these were mission critical financial transaction applications. So they were very happy and very grateful with where we were able to get them in just 2 or 3 weeks. Another one of our customers had an issue with distributed data centers across the world, and they wanted to move to the cloud, but obviously they need high performance for their users across the globe. So they were able to use Velostrata to very easily migrate the appropriate workloads from the appropriate on-prem data centers into their geographical cloud data center counterparts. So what's interesting about this use case, and kind of like what Lee was talking about earlier, some of these workloads went into Azure and some of them went into AWS. So they really were leveraging a multi-cloud and multi-geography strategy to maintain the performance and lack of lag that they had on-prem, but while realizing all the benefits of the cloud. And a third customer use case came to us, and they were moving right along, but kind of slow. They had a process that was working okay. They were doing about 20 VMs per week into the cloud. They saw us at a trade show, and they were extremely excited. They had a certain level of comfort with the cloud, but obviously they'd rather get there sooner rather than later. So after deploying Velostrata, we were able to take them from 20 VMs per week to about 30 VMs per day. And that was partially through just how easy our interface is, how quickly the applications get to the cloud, but also using our runbook automation to automate some of the remaining multi-tier applications. So those are 3 customer success stories. And then on our next slide, we have one that we'll dive into just a little bit more. So we have kind of our 4th customer success story for this webinar. As a healthcare co, a pretty big healthcare co. They're on the Fortune 50. They had to migrate over 5,000 servers. And some of these servers were physical, some of them were virtual, some of them were Windows, some of them were Linux, and they wanted a cloud migration solution that could tackle all of these in one fell swoop, just one solution, not a bunch of piecemeal solutions. So we were extremely happy with how Velostrata performed here, as was the customer. They've given us a lot of really cool quotes. But one of the most impressive things was that after the first phase of this migration, they did some of their own ROI and labor calculations. And by their own calculations, they projected that using Velostrata over the replication agents that they were looking at probably saved them between 5 to 7 hours per server in things like downtime, complex cutovers, agent configuration, things like that. And ultimately was able to shave 6 full months off of the project's duration. So they were in the cloud 6 months faster than they anticipated. And they saved about $2.8 million in labor as a result. So, when you're looking at cloud migration software, all these little things that you have to do ultimately still cost money, regardless of what the licenses might cost for that tool. And some of these tools are actually free, but they end up racking up such a major labor bill that they're actually not cost effective. So we've had both a lot of customers and partners come to us and be very thankful for the labor that we can save, because it really empowers both the partner and the IT to focus on the parts that are very important, get through the cloud migration smoother and easier, and then focus on other projects. Every IT team has 20 projects on their bucket list, and they end up spending a lot of time on unnecessary minutia during a cloud migration project that sometimes has impacts outside of that cloud migration project. So this healthcare customer was extremely happy. They were thrilled. We were thrilled with the numbers they calculated. These are their numbers. So just kind of a really cool story about how you can really optimize your cloud migration processes. So with that, let's check back. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Sorry, Sam. I was just going to say, I think that's a key point. I mean, I think for a lot of customers that we talk to, that lift of migration aspect takes up so much time for them that actually it has knock-on costs, not only in labor, but extension in licensing costs, extension in data center costs, infrastructure renewals. If they can't move as quickly as they want to migrate those workloads into cloud, it has a knock-on effect. So I can understand how they've saved so much cost in labor, but I would imagine there's probably a significant saving in software and infrastructure as well when doing that.
Yeah, great point. They didn't focus on that in at least the calculation I saw, but it's definitely a great point. They were able to get rid of some of their on-prem costs, much quicker. So it's definitely likely they reduced their CapEx and OpEx a lot quicker than they were anticipating. So definitely good point. Okay, so that covers some of our customer success stories and our architecture. So let's see how our demo is doing. It's been running for about 5 to 10 minutes while we've been chatting. So our application by and large should be running in the cloud. So let's check on that quick. Great. Okay, so going back to our demo, we can see that the run in cloud operation has completed. It looks like some other operations have taken place too. Things like the guest OS shutdown, reconfiguring the virtual machine. All of these things are really about automatically adapting the on-prem VM and getting it operational in the cloud. So we do all that automatically. Another way that Velostrata makes this super easy. So let's go back to summary and check back in on our portlet. Great. Okay, so we can see now that the VM state is running and that the storage migration is in progress. So we're migrating about 40 gigabytes over into the cloud, but that's going to take place while this VM is running. So if we go here and we reopen our Sugar CRM app, we'll be able to see that it's still running normally the way that it should be. Yep, so here we go. So this app is actually now running directly in the cloud. Velostrata has automatically adapted, the IP address and the DNS entries and all those things. So that's why we're able to seamlessly go from on-prem to the cloud, even while the rest of the data migrates in the background. And if you're wondering, okay, well, what happens if we need some of the on-prem data before it's migrated into the cloud? A lot like fast forwarding in Netflix, even if it hasn't downloaded yet. If you fast forward or you access data that hasn't been migrated yet, then we'll immediately queue that up and transfer that over to the cloud. So that's definitely not a concern. And since we picked write back as our storage policy option, again, any changes you make in the cloud right now will be synced back with on-prem as well. So your data remains completely stateful and completely consistent. All right, well, that pretty much concludes the demo. What we wanted to show was how quickly Velostrata can get an application running in the cloud. Took about, 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long Lee and I were talking while this worked in the background. The background migration is going to continue until it completes, so not much to see other than this progress bar continuing to move forward. It actually won't take too long, but will still take a little bit longer than we have remaining in our webinar here today. But like we said, pretty impressive. We think that Velostrata is able to get this application running in the cloud within 5 or 10 minutes while the storage migration takes place in the background. We automatically adapted the on-prem VM to work in the cloud. So we did things like the DNS, all of that stuff automatically. So as you can see, we can log in here super easily with the same DNS name, even though it's now running in the cloud versus on-prem like it was previously. So let's go back to the slides now and wrap up our webinar. Okay, so so like I said, hope you enjoyed that demo. We hope that it kind of helps provide a little bit of context when we talk about what we do and how we do it. We're a big fan of seeing is believing, so hopefully that was a helpful demo. We're certainly happy to see that everything got loaded in the cloud within a couple minutes. And now I'm going to pass things back over to Lee to wind us down.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks. So I guess in closing, I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we're doing with our customers. I mentioned before we kind of see these three pillars of the strategy, the migration, and the management aspect of this. From a Nephos perspective, we work very closely with our customers through every step of that. One of the initial starting points is all around smart strategy, so understanding what makes a good candidate for a cloud migration, what's the true cost of those things. We do that for virtualized infrastructure, we do that for file-based infrastructure too, really trying to gain a deep understanding of where you're trying to get to, analyze the infrastructure that you have today, and then provide a framework to work against. From a Velostrata perspective, we provide Velostrata as a software platform. We also leverage it ourselves for our own smart migration service, which is all around, I guess, taking the Velostrata platform a step further and giving you the additional manpower that you may need to perform those migrations at the same time. Thank you. That's all we had in terms of closing. We'd just like to thank you for your time today. We hope that you found it useful. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. and we'll be happy to answer them. And hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lee, for hosting me, and thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate it. Thank you.